how do you encourage other people to share and be part of those conversations, who might feel less likely to put their hand up, more held back by fears around perceptions? How do we get people to actually engage in those conversations, so it's just not me and you patting each other on the back about those things? Do you know what I mean, mate?
There's this great Clementine Ford joke where she's like, why did the male feminist walk into a bar? And the answer is because it was set so low, which I think is, a classic line for you and I to be like, yeah, we get it. For anyone who's having problems with that sort of stuff, I might just sort of share my own problems and difficulties that I've only just started to overcome. Michael, you and I have been involved in X number of conversations, somewhere between 1 and 1,000, where someone who has power over our career is going to say something. And look, the experience for me is almost always about the appearance or sort of sexual desirability of a younger female colleague, younger female employee. And, 5 years ago, my response would have been to just sort of quietly go, okay, man, take a sip of beer and change the subject and just store that away and be like, Blogsy's a bit of a bad bloke. And there's a degree of cowardice in that, but I think there's a degree where that's how privileged men can understand what the patriarchy is. It is those conversations. And then you can understand a little bit about what being an ally is, where walking away from those conversations is one thing. Not agreeing with people, doing that is one very small thing you can do. But appreciating that it means something to say, listen, champ, you're welcome to your thoughts on whatever the topic might be, but that's not the sort of conversation I'll be engaging in. And I don't think it's the sort of conversation you should be engaging in. And I'd encourage you to just have a think about, what sort of chats you want to be having.
Yeah.
And that's easy for me to say because I'm a fairly senior person, and I've got a bit of a reputation for being out there on these things. And it's not easy if you're a, grad, or if you're 4 weeks into your new job and, there are these uncomfortable comments being made.
Yeah.
But I think what I would encourage anyone in that very awkward situation to do is to reflect on how completely awful it is for our female identifying colleagues and our non-binary colleagues to be attempting to do their best to work in a rough profession where that sort of talk is acceptable.
Yeah.
And, yes, you might feel awkward, and yes, you might worry. I get it. Believe me, I get it. And I've had my moments of cowardice in those situations before, and I will probably have moments of cowardice in those situations again. But I'd encourage you and me in that scenario to do our best to say, no, listen, champ, that's not how it's done. And you're going to need to reconsider that if you want me to think of you as someone worth doing business with in future.
Yeah. Oh, look, mate, it's so important. And I think and we were talking about mental health before coming on. And I think it goes to the importance it is that there are people willing to speak out from a place of
privilege.
Well, from a place of privilege, but it is privilege, but it is sharing, and it is difficult because you don't want to be seen as, leveraging that story but then it's also really important that those stories get told. And so someone's got to tell those stories. And sometimes that just has to be you, especially if you've got a passion for that. And so I think sometimes people worry about, whether it's just signaling or whether it's trying to leverage. And all I would say to that is, if you're true to yourself and if you have a real passion for sharing, then you need to. It's kind of like in martial arts. Part of being a black belt is training other people to become a black belt.
But also part of being a black belt is wearing the belt.
Well, it is.
Like it's not all fighting on the mat. Like you have to go around and hold yourself out of that. So you're signaling like this whole, again, Michael, this is probably not the place to get into it, but the idea that it's bad to say, don't be a misogynist, you fuckwit, Like I just don't even understand. Like I want to be perceived as someone who says that. That is a virtue that I'm very happy to signal.
Yeah.
If you think I'm signaling that virtue, great.
Yeah.
I'm not merely doing that, but yes, I am signaling that, and I think it is a virtue worth signaling.
Yeah. But I know myself that I sometimes won't say things because I'm worried about the perception.
Yep.
Right. Not about the perception of me, but a perception of me leveraging it. Yep. If I share something that's difficult, or if I share something like that.
Well, International Women's Day, shout out to Julie, best receptionist in the game. You know, that like that sort of empty.
Yeah. Where my point is, I 100% believe that if the more we could share, like from whatever those topics are, the more insight we get as well. Like, mate, I learned so much by you sharing those topics, honestly, like, because it's and this is what always goes through my head when I want to talk about something that might be uncomfortable for someone else to hear. I just remind myself that I only went and saw a psychologist because I heard someone on a stage of a business event about adult ADHD. So it was important for me to hear that story. And it's important for me to hear you talking about the patriarchy and to hear you talking about privilege and to question those things in my head. And so I guess and the other point with social media is that the interaction, and it's like 10 to 15% of the audience. There's all these other people who really value what you have to say. I'm sorry, but that's advice you've given before that is so true. Sorry, Michael. I should have interrupted. Completely agree. Keep going. No. Yeah. So I guess the encouragement that I and you would have for people out there to please speak truth to these things.
Truth to power in a literal sense, yeah.
And don't think that that you need to be worried about perception or other things. Obviously, when you're an employed lawyer, you do need to manage things. And I've got a lot of discussion about the benefits of being your own boss, because I can say
I'm sure you do.
but I think all power to you, mate. And people like Finn, exactly. Like, man, she is just so the best. I've got like,
Finn actually is the best. Yes.
I just admire her and what she does just so bloody much. And I think a lot of people see that and I think you give people a lot of, you give people permission then to be the next wave to step up and say, I support you, James. Like, this is something that, we need to do something about. Maybe I don't know how to bloody do it, but you don't have to lead from the front. You can get in behind and be that support as well, even the vocal support. And
that means a lot to me, Michael. Thank you.
No, man, like it takes a lot of guts to get up there. And because I know how much it, I've struggled with it. And I always thought, especially with the podcast, it's an opportunity to talk about stories and to give people this opportunity. And for me, the tangible, actual, the best podcast I did actually, in the last few years, it was 100% a podcast I did with someone, and it had some of the lesser numbers of listens, and that disappointed me. But it was a survivor story from a situation where he was a survivor from institutionalized abuse, and we spoke about that. Now it's just so bloody important to tell those stories, and for me, learning about that and having the opportunity to tell those stories and was like, oh, this is what I'm here to do, to be able to give people that platform, and whether it's Finn and we talk about all of these things, and I guess that's the position that if you're out there, and we've talked some pretty big meta topics in the last 15 minutes. But what advice would you have for young lawyer, older lawyer, law firm saying, okay, I get it. We've got to do something. It's not a box ticking exercise like marketing, buy umbrellas, get stress balls.
Yep.
What do they need to start doing?
I don't know the answer to that in a macro sense. So, for example, when you say the firm, I've got no particular good answer. I think in the real micro sense, there are real opportunities. So, if you are, for example, a litigation solicitor who briefs a lot of barristers and you only brief blokes, the reason you only brief blokes may not be because you are a misogynist. It might be because you want the best outcome for your client. And you've worked well with Mr. Bloggs, Mr. Smith, and Mr. McGee in the past. This is a classic Mr. McGee matter, and you know Mr. McGee is going to smash it out of the park. Now, your job, your duty to your client is to use the barrister who you think is going to do the best job. And so the problem here is not that you chose Mr. McGee. The problem is that you do not know who Kelly Jones, who may not wish to be identified with any gender, is. You may not know who Ms. Smith is. You may not know who Ms. Thompson is. And so it might sound a little bit trite or a little bit silly, but you might just you might ask a clerk on the floor of the barristers' chambers you like, look, sorry to be blunt, are there any young female barristers coming through who I should have a coffee with so I can understand their practice? I'm building, I just have 6 CVs of young female juniors who are between 2 to 8 years and their areas of practice who I can't wait to send a brief to when the right thing comes in. And so I'm not sitting here saying if you only brief blokes or you only instruct male, building experts or medical experts or whatever, that you should be cancelled and you're a problem and an effigy of you should be burned. We can save that for stage 2 of the revolution. But I'm saying that there needs to be a proactive step. And that micro step, I say, is frankly networking. It's being open to having some of the space you've made for white men who look a lot like the people you went to high school with, freed up for people of other genders, regardless of what those genders might be, or people who might not wish to identify with any gender, to understand their story, and frankly, for your client's benefit, to understand their expertise. The best forensic accountant might be the one you've never met, and it might be one of a gender you were not expecting. And you will never know that, and your client will never get the benefit of that if you don't find out. And then even if Johnny White Bloke, son of a convict, who married the daughter of a convict, completely colonial background, and privileged as they come, might be the best forensic accountant or barrister or whatever all, but you don't know that until you've come to understood the shape of the whole marketplace rather than just the shape of the rich white man marketplace. So you're speaking from a position of ignorance, and that does not assist your client. And so you need to go out there and build your network and learn. And it's a challenge I'm in the process of accepting at the moment. And it's one that I'd encourage anyone else to go and try to accept as well. Yeah.
And well, it's a good challenge for me to give more people a platform too, mate. No, in all seriousness, that's.
Yeah. Go check out my YouTube page, Coffee to Case Note.
But we need to, I love action. I want to be part of the solution by taking action and being able to empower the action, So if I can help give people a platform to be known, then all the better. And I think and that's a huge responsibility. But look, I think please keep sharing, because you're informing this privileged white middle class guy from Queensland. In all seriousness, man, that's what I think that does. Sometimes you read things and you're like, oh, what? And then you rethink, and then you challenge, and then you make the realization. You just have to be a big enough adult to not take that first reaction as because obviously we all see different things and we all hear different things and we take it within the prism of our own experience. But actually having the chance to reflect on it, that's why, like, over the course of the last 18 months, seeing how people have shared and the difficulty to share their own personal stories. It's actually so much more, it's so hard for the personal story, so much more important than for others who can stand up first as well to be
so true.
doing so.